कोथरूडच्या महात्मा सोसायटीत चक्क गवा शिरला आणि वनविभागाची धावाधाव सुरू झाली आहे. नागरिकांमध्ये कुठे भीतीचं वातावरण दिसलं तर कुठे मानवी वस्तीत गवा कुठून आला अशा चर्चाही घडायला लागल्या.
In journalism, we say that if a dog bites a man, it's not a news. But what if a man bites a dog? Well, that is a news. Finding a gaur or a wild buffalo in the wilderness may not excite many. But imagine seeing the same animal in your backyard. Well, that's a different ballgame altogether.
Actually, I see a message popping up on my phone as I was driving to rescue, and it was about the rundown that had entered Mahatma Society. And I immediately reached the location. I was basically stationed to document whatever was happening. And the first dart shots went out. The gaur, it got a bit agitated, and it jumped off the wall and started running towards the city. People also started chasing the gaur on their bikes, cars, on feet, and that's the thing. The gaur was running ahead, and as it was seeing people coming after it, it was just going and going and going, and people were just trying to corner it and try to capture it. It got cornered a couple of times by forest officials, our teams, and police officers as well. But it managed to get out from that place again and again because it's a very heavy animal, and it was losing its energy as it was happening again and again.
He had some bruises over his nose. He had some bruises over his knees. Those were actually happened when he was running through bushes. He was jumping from fences, from trees and all, from buildings and gates. He was crossing over. So when he was doing all these things, that time these bruises and all these scratches happened. But those were very minor. Those were not that serious because these animals in jungle, they get these kind of bruises alone. But what actually caused him the fatality to his life is the mental trauma and the stress. He was totally exhausted when I reached out to him. When I reached him, his body temperature was so high that I didn't require my thermometer to check the body temperature. That high his temperature was. I was running behind him. I could see a lot of people with their vehicles. They were crossing over me. They're going behind him. I was not able to reach. I was running behind the gaur to reach out to the gaur. And in that process, I myself ran 5 kilometers behind the gaur. So you can see like people were not finding it difficult because they had vehicle. But that poor gaur, he was running for his life for 5 kilometers, and that overexerted him a lot. When I reached out to them, I told them to release all the ropes. There were ropes on his both the legs, hind legs and front legs. Then his face was covered by a cloth so that he could not see people and all. And people started pouring water on him just because to calm him down. So this is not what animals need to calm them down. What they need is loneliness. When you leave them alone, they become calm.
On 9th of December in Kothrud, when the gaur entered the city, and things went down in a way that nobody expected. Nobody expected the gaur to come in the city to begin with. It was unusual. It had not happened before. And after the entire thing, I think the first thing I probably felt was frustration and rage, because the animal had already passed away. Reasons so many, but I think I felt really frustrated and angry because I felt like there were things that could have gone right and this outcome could have been avoided completely. Broadly speaking, I think that there was a complete lack of coordination between all the stakeholders who are extremely key in ensuring the safety of the animal and people when such an incident happens. So whether it was public, media, the forest department, rescue teams, police, animal husbandry, everyone, all the important stakeholders, I think there was a complete lack of coordination over there. And I feel like if everyone knew exactly what their role was and played their part, I think that animal would have been saved. On one side, you could say that, is it too much to expect all the stakeholders to play their role to the T, right? I probably thought the same thing, when that happened. But I think what was more important, and my comeback to that basically is that there are things that can be done to be better coordinated as much as possible, which is why right after that incident, within 2 weeks, we organized wildlife conflict management training, and all the stakeholders were brought together and explained their roles in such situations. And I felt it was really important to do quickly, because if another incident like this came up, it should not repeat. You see, and what was interesting is, right, just the next day after that training happened, did the next Gaur come in. And things did go right. So no, it's not too much to expect. Everyone just needed to know, and I also think it was no one's fault beyond a point, because they just didn't know better.
Man-animal conflicts are rising, and they're bound to rise. A senior forest official from Maharashtra explained the threat that is looming large.
Definitely the Gaur could have been saved. But only problem was the number of people, number of media persons who were after the Gaur just to see a glimpse of the Gaur and to take some photographs. That really created a problem. Forest department for last so many years, they are creating the awareness that especially in urban areas, whenever there is a wildlife, what we need from the people is the free space so that forest department can work for the rescue. Another important aspect was timely help of the police department and revenue authorities. What happened in Kothrud was unfortunate because timely police help could not reach, and the people and media, they were after the Gaur. That poor animal had to run a lot. A big animal got exhausted and died of heart attack. So that was, to be frank, it's really sad. I will say that situation is bad. It can become worse also, because now unless and until people listen to the forest department as what we are telling them what to do, and most importantly what not to do. Because I always tell people I cannot go and teach the animals. I can teach the people, and they will have to understand. And what is the biggest problem is the question of space. We have already ventured into the space of the animals, and now the animals, they are trying to come out. They wanted their space back. We are unable to give them their space back.
Wildlife species, they enter cities just because of land use change in the landscapes. And if you generally look at the landscapes in Maharashtra, broadly it can be categorized in maybe 3 categories. So the first one is completely natural landscapes, and which are spread over very large areas. And those are mostly sanctuaries and national parks. And those areas are actually where we see resident population of such wildlife species like Gaur. And if you look at basically in Western Ghats, Koina and Mahabaleshwar area, where you have big protected areas, there is a good resident population of this Gaur. But what happens, these natural landscapes where they are not completely protected by any law, some kind of human interference is there, which is a moderate kind of human interference, which is there at the countrysides, the fringes of the cities, where there is a mixed kind of land use. In this mixed land use, there is agriculture patches, there is a grassland, there are grasslands, there is a stunted forest, there are settlements, but some kind of wilderness is preserved. So even if these species enter this kind of landscape which is moderately disturbed, that is fine. Means even people are like okay with that. They are used to such kind of occurrence of wildlife. But what happens when this landscape get disturbed even further, when we have basically urban kind of landscape, or say many times even if it's not like completely constructed, there are many fences that get installed in these landscapes, yeah, and just fence properties, they don't allow this movement of wildlife, it disturbs that. So they don't have any choice but just to follow the open areas, and somewhere they lost their original track, and then they enter urban landscapes. And that is the third kind of landscape, wherein we see most of the landscape is completely constructed.
So right now we are here at a watershed and a landscape which is just at the city fringes. And here if we see what is the health of this landscape. So we can see that there are various land classes, various vegetation patterns. Also there is a village. So all these things play a large role in habitat of various wild animals. And I would say that Gaur is one of the representative of this biodiversity, and that straying it into a city is also one of the representation that how our fringes are changing. So once we see and analyze these fringes and how it can act into the various biodiversity habitats. So here we can see that there are some open patches, there are some tree clusters, there are villages, then there are paddy fields or there are agriculture lands of all the villages. And all these things are still pretty wild. So they have not changed into something like a developed area which is very similar to a city. But this is really wild where people and biodiversity can coexist without much conflict to each other.
If you have to blame somebody for the incident, there were two people whom we should blame. First is the people who were actually making live of that incident. So it is not that everything you are seeing should be captured on mobile, and okay, if you want to capture it, but if you are making it live, if you are showing it to the other people through Facebook live or Twitter live, then it will definitely hamper the forest officials' efforts. Second is the media should be blamed, because most of the time we, for the sake of TRP or for the sake of more traffic to my website, I made sure that whatever happening there should be made available to my people right away or on that particular moment. So these two kind of people actually made difficult for the forest people to handle the position. Instead of that, I should have been, journalists should have asked the police officers and the forest official why they are not imposing curfew in that area. Whenever I see that incident again in the flashback, I blame the mobile for that condition. Journalists were shooting on their mobile, common people were shooting on their mobiles, and everybody was sending this information outside the area. So more and more people were continued coming there. So we want to document everything. It's good, we should document the things, but we don't have the purpose behind it. I don't know why I'm shooting that Indian Gaur. Whether I want to store it on my mobile, I want to study it, I don't know. We are losing our sensitivity. I mentioned that 4 days after the death of Indian Gaur, a section of people, a fraction of people actually had increased sensitivity about the animal.
माझं व्यक्तिगत मत असं आहे की मीडियाला जे घडतंय ते दाखवणार आम्ही, चांगलं वाईट ठरवायचं पब्लिकने. त्यामुळे तिथं पब्लिक जे हुल्लडबाजी करत होती ते सुद्धा दाखवणं त्यांना भागच होतं. हा, त्याचं ग्लोरिफिकेशन न करता उलट हे चूक होतंय अशा ट्रॅकवर मीडियाने या बातम्या न्यायला हव्या होत्या. काहीतरी एक्साइटिंग घडलं ना की त्याच्यातनं एन्जॉयमेंट शोधायची अशी सध्या वृत्ती आहे की पहिले मी सेल्फी काढून, फोटो काढून, शूट काढून सगळ्यात आधी अपलोड कसं करेन. म्हणजे असं विनोदाने नेहमी आपण बघतो की कोणी मरत असेल तरी लोक पहिले फोटो काढतात त्याला हात देण्यापेक्षा. इथं दुर्दैवाने तसं घडलं. आमचे एक मित्र आहेत, मोठे मूर्तिकार आहेत, त्यांच्याकडून एक प्रचंड मोठी अशी साधारणपणे 8 फूट बाय 6 फुटाची गव्याची प्रतिकृती इथं आता आमच्या आउटलेटच्या बाहेरच मांडली. तिथं हळद कुंकू फुलं ठेवली आणि तिथं पाटी लिहिली की म्हणजे संपूर्ण मानवजातीच्या वतीने आम्ही तुझी माफी मागतो, अशी पाटीच लावली की तुला आम्ही जिवंत ठेवू नाही शकलो.
To be very honest, we are very behind when it comes to the sensitization or the awareness amongst the people about wildlife. It is oftenly said that wildlife education is the first step towards conservation. So, since last 10 years at least, I have been seeing that a lot of people from urban areas, they have been visiting various protected areas as a tourist or maybe as a photographer, but they fail to understand the object which they are photographing. So if somebody is entering a tiger reserve or a national park, wildlife sanctuary, if they are seeing a tiger, they just identify the tiger. Then they say this is P1, this is P2, this is T1, this is T4. But unfortunately, if you ask them in depth, what is the ecological role played by a tiger, do's and don'ts to photograph an object, like how close you can go, how dangerous it is to go really close to these animals. So you will come to know that unfortunately we lack in awareness.
The fear, when you fear an animal, people forget that the animal fears you twice or thrice as more, because first of all, it is in a completely new territory. On top of that, it is facing something which is a threat to it, because animals have been hunted by humans for eons, and that has been imprinted in their memory, which is why you see that animals don't stray into human settlements or they hunt at night. Why most animals are nocturnal, why animals are diurnal. When we say diurnal, they are half active during the day and half active during the night. So this is because they want to stay protected from other factors. Other factors, one of them is the human factor. So it is extremely scared. It is extremely in a very stressful, traumatic and panic situation when it is confronting you. And you are feeling doubly as threatened as well, and which is why your knee-jerk reactions are always going to be to protect yourself. But how are you going to protect yourself? If no one teaches you the how to protect, you will never know what to do. If you were to say that, how will people know what to do? During the Gaur incidents, what was happening was that people were looking in the TV that there is a Gaur running in the streets, and they were turning and looking at the outside the window, and there was actually the Gaur that was running in the street. And we go to villages where there is high amount of human-leopard conflict, and we try to talk to them. What is this animal that you're seeing? Everyone just knows leopard, scary, death, bad. Those are the train of thoughts that you go through. But you have to interject those train of thoughts and put information in them, and put information which they've already seen that information. If you go and tell them, okay, you saw the leopard, what did it do? Did it run away from you? They're like, yes. Why do you think it did that? Because it's scared of you. Oh, it is scared of me. I thought I was scared of the leopard. That is how, if no one is going to converse with you to explain you what the situation is, then you are never going to know any better. And that is the thing, the medium of conversation.
Villagers have been living with the wild animals and they are very used to them. And most importantly, they don't make a fuss of it.
गावातले लोक अशी जेव्हा जनावरं बघतात तर त्याच्या मागे पळतात का, मारतात का, किंवा त्याला घेराव करतात का?
नाही सापडत नाही ते.
हां, म्हणजे जसं कोला दिसला तर काय केलं गावातल्या लोकांनी?
काही नाही केलं.
पण जर तुमच्या शेतावर काही नुकसान करत असेल, जशी रानडुकरं आहेत,
मग ती राखण करायची, रातभर जाऊन बसायचं, मांडाव घालायचं, राहायचं. आता एवढी पहिल्यासारखी नाहीत. एकदा ना भातं इकडे वाला 2-3 भातं त्यांची वावरं तुडावली त्या बाबांचं तिकडं मोर. आमच्या घराजवळ शेती आहे, घराजवळ पण येतात.
There are several places where people are coexisting beautifully with wildlife around them. In a very recent incident, when two rusty-spotted cat kittens were discovered in a field while harvesting, the locals there were telling us about how there are leopards they commonly cite them. And we've never heard a complaint issue from there, or any, issue been raised that no, please come and take the leopard away, or any pressure on the department to come and trap a leopard. And they said, yes, there are leopards here that have been living, and we know that she comes around this time. Last year at this time she had given cubs. Now the cubs have grown up. One has gone away. So there are so many of these where you find, people who are coexisting. So I think that there is, especially people who have grown up living around, wildlife. I think it's a lot easier for them to coexist with them. I think for urban folks, it's a little bit of a challenge because now those boundaries are, getting a little blurry. But there's just so many incidences of people coexisting with, whether it's leopards, whether it's dhangars with wolves.
So there is a place called Bhigwan, which is 100 kilometers from Pune, and that's a place which attracts a lot of migratory birds every season. So that place is famous for the flamingos. So 10 years back, if you would have visited that place, there were a lot of fishermen, the boatmen basically, and any bird which used to get caught in some nets, they used to just poach it and eat it up. But after a lot of educational programs, after creating a lot of awareness, now the scenario has completely changed. So if you go there now, all the boatsmen, they are turned into good birders. And you can see that these birds, these boatmen, they take you inside, and they basically introduce you to various facets of these wonderful birds. And if they come across any injured bird, then they obviously get in touch with the forest department, and they see to it that the birds are treated and again rescued back into the wild. So I think that's a good example.
We definitely need to learn to live with wild animals. But it is equally important to understand that why human-animal interactions, or conflicts as you may call them, have increased over the years. We found the answer to this question in a village called Vedas, located about 160 kilometers from Pune.
Vedas was at the receiving end of a devastating Nisarga cyclone that hit India's west coast in 2020. Mohan Upadhyay, who has been working tirelessly to save the olive ridley turtles for over 2 decades, says people are leaving villages for cities in search of work.
सन 2000 साली मी मुंबई सोडून माझ्या गावाला वेळासला स्थायिक झालो, आणि त्यावेळेला मी जेव्हा गावात राहायला आलो तेव्हा साधारणपणे 2,500 लोकवस्ती ह्या गावाची होती. हळूहळू इथे मायनिंगसारखे काही प्रकल्प आले, त्यानंतर इथल्या बागायती संपत गेल्या, जागा जमिनी लोकांनी विकायला सुरुवात केली. बरंचसं जे तरुण पिढीचं एक यूथ होतं हे नोकरी धंद्याच्या निमित्ताने शहराकडे धावत होतं. असं करता करता हळूहळू आज तारखेला म्हणजे सन 2021 मध्ये गावाची लोकसंख्या ही 825 फक्त राहिलेली आहे. आणि त्याच्यामागे थोडासा एक आपण म्हटलं तर निसर्ग चक्रीवादळ जे झालं तर त्याचाही परिणाम दिसून येतो की त्याच्यामुळे सुद्धा बरीचशी काही कुटुंब इथे कुठल्याही प्रकारे रोजगार किंवा व्यवसाय उरलेला नाही, म्हणून इथनं स्थलांतरित होऊन शहरांकडे धाव घेतली आणि गावची लोकसंख्या इथे हळूहळू कमी व्हायला लागली. आणि लोकसंख्या कमी झाल्यामुळे बऱ्यापैकी इथलं जे वन्यजीवन आहे ते आता हळूहळू गावाच्या जवळ यायला सुरुवात झालेली असताना आपल्याला दिसतंय.
Like Pune, several cities in India are at the cusp of development. So while we are building more malls, roads, complexes, let's spare a thought and some land for our wild friends. We need to understand that if they live, we get to live. Peaceful coexistence is the only way forward.